the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
A cartel boss, who was actually officially indicted in New York, wasn't arrested this week. He was eliminated by a United States military kinetic strike down in Venezuela.
Yeah, which is just a massive escalation.
Right. So today on the Deep Dive, we are looking at how the U.S. government just took 2 decades of Middle Eastern counterterrorism tactics and, well, dropped them directly into Latin America.
It's a total paradigm shift.
It really is. We're analyzing this huge geopolitical and military strategy shift, and we're using a June 14th, 2026 article from the conservative publication Red State as our roadmap today.
And we should probably clarify something up front about that source.
Yes, absolutely. Because Red State is a highly partisan outlet, and they're dealing with very politically charged topics here, our mission today is not to validate their politics. We aren't taking any sides.
Right. We're just here to impartially dissect the administration's stated military strategy, right?
Exactly. The claims made, the underlying mechanics of this huge policy shift, we're just unpacking it exactly as the author lays it out.
And, I mean, it is a fundamental operational pivot. For decades, the standard playbook for dealing with these transnational cartels was entirely built on law enforcement.
Like guys in suits with clipboards.
Yeah, exactly. You gather intelligence, you build a massive RICO case, you secure a federal indictment, and then you work with local authorities to, coordinate a raid and get an extradition.
Right. But what this text outlines is the explicit dismantling of that entire law enforcement framework.
In favor of a purely military one.
Which brings us to the breaking news hook of the article, right? The death of Niño Guerrero. He was the leader of the Venezuela-based organization Tren de Aragua, or TDA.
A major player.
Huge. And the wording the article uses is really highly specific. It doesn't say he was apprehended or killed in a shootout with local police. It says he was eliminated via a swift and lethal kinetic strike.
Which is military terminology.
Exactly. I mean, imagine if your local police department suddenly swapped out their arrest warrants for military rules of engagement.
Right, just bypassing the courts entirely.
No Miranda rights, just an airstrike.
Yeah.
But here's the part that I really want to understand. How does a cartel boss end up getting what the Red State article explicitly calls the ISIS treatment?
That's a great question.
Because, ISIS held territory in an active war zone in the Middle East. Cartels operate in sovereign, heavily populated nations.
So to understand the how here, we really have to look at the bureaucratic mechanism that unlocks this specific kind of firepower.
Okay.
And that is the Foreign Terrorist Organization, or FTO designation.
Ah, okay, the FTO label.
Yeah. War Secretary Pete Hegseth actually went on Sunday's Face the Nation to explain the mechanics of this strategy. By officially classifying TDA as an FTO rather than just a violent criminal enterprise,
right,
the administration entirely shifts the burden of action from the Department of Justice over to the Department of Defense.
Meaning you no longer need an evidence chain for a federal courtroom. You literally just need a target package for a missile.
Precisely. Under a law enforcement paradigm, right, a police officer can typically only use lethal force if there is an imminent threat to life at that exact moment.
Like if someone is actively drawing a weapon.
Exactly.
Right.
But under military rules and engagement against a designated FTO, the target's actual status as an enemy combatant is what authorizes the strike.
Wow. So it doesn't matter what they're doing at that exact second.
It doesn't. Hegseth made it super clear this new standard applies to the leadership, the networks, and even the logistics.
Wait, logistics?
Yeah, he specifically noted that drug boats run by these FTOs are now subject to the exact same military targeting.
Okay, but dropping a bomb on a drug boat out in international waters is one thing, right? Dropping a bomb inside Venezuela is a totally different ballgame.
It's a huge distinction.
The article points out the strike was carried out by the United States Southern Command. But how do we bypass a sovereign nation's airspace and their jurisdiction without it being literally an act of war?
That is where the legal shield of the, quote, invitation comes into play.
The invitation.
Right. The text emphasizes that the U.S. military was invited in by the Venezuelan government.
Really?
Yeah. This wasn't some unilateral, covert CIA operation.
Like the bin Laden raid in Pakistan.
Exactly. It wasn't a violation of airspace like that. It was a bilateral military action. The host nation effectively waived its own primary jurisdictional rights over that specific territory and that specific target.
Just handed it over.
Pretty much. Granting the U.S. military the full legal authority to execute the strike right there within its borders.
Okay, but if the DoD is now running point, that inherently changes the end goal, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, if the gold standard for U.S. law enforcement has historically been to capture these guys alive.
Right, like El Chapo.
Exactly, like El Chapo. You capture them, parade them into a federal courtroom, and put them on trial. A kinetic strike feels like a massive departure from that.
It is a total 180, and the article actually notes that Face the Nation host Margaret Brennan pushed Hegseth really hard on this exact point.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, she brought up the fact that Guerrero actually had a standing indictment in the Southern District of New York.
The SDNY.
Right. So she asked, why not do a snatch and grab operation to bring him in for trial?
Which is a totally fair question.
And Brennan actually used a very specific legal comparison to challenge the administration's logic here. She compared Guerrero to ousted Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro.
Oh, interesting. Why Maduro?
Because both men had U.S. indictments hanging over their heads in the exact same district, the SDNY.
Oh, I see.
Yet Maduro was captured alive.
Yeah.
So Brennan's underlying question to Hegseth is, if we can manage to capture a former head of state alive to stand trial, why are we suddenly defaulting to airstrikes for cartel bosses?
So what was Hegseth's response to that?
It was incredibly blunt. He framed it entirely as a risk assessment.
A risk assessment.
Yeah. He argued that Maduro was a national leader, which carries certain geopolitical implications that, justify the risk of a capture.
Okay.
But he basically dismissed Guerrero as strictly a terrorist leader, or, as he called him on the air, a dirtbag.
A dirtbag, wow.
Right. So the core of Hegseth's argument is this. Why risk the lives of elite American special forces to take a target alive when you can simply neutralize them from the air?
He's articulating a doctrine of basically zero unnecessary risk for American operators.
Exactly. In the past, the value of a high-profile criminal trial, the intelligence you could gather from interrogations, and just the public demonstration of the U.S. justice system.
The optics of it.
Yeah, all of that was considered worth the operational risk of a ground raid.
Right.
But Hegseth is publicly resetting that equation. By prioritizing troop safety to this extreme degree, he's arguing that a terrorist designation essentially forfeits the target's relevance to the judicial system.
But wait, isn't the entire purpose of elite Tier 1 special forces to execute complex, high-risk capture missions?
That has historically been their bread and butter, yes.
Right. So if the new standard is that we just don't risk troops if a missile can do the job, doesn't that fundamentally mean we've abandoned the concept of international criminal justice in these cases?
That's a very fair deduction.
It sounds like we are permanently closing the courthouse doors.
Yeah, if the default mechanism for dealing with indicted transnational criminals just becomes a drone strike, the international criminal justice system becomes largely obsolete for these top-tier targets.
Mm-hmm.
It completely removes the necessity of witness testimony, of jury trials, and, the incredibly complex diplomacy of extradition.
But the text frames it a specific way.
Yeah, the text frames Hegseth's stance not as some tragedy of losing due process, but as a pragmatic evolution.
Right.
The legal architecture is basically being bypassed because the administration views the threat as an active war, not a crime wave.
And the article makes it very, very clear that the Guerrero strike isn't just a one-off anomaly.
No, not at all.
It's the proof of concept. Because when Brennan asked if we should expect to see these exact same kinetic strikes in other countries, like Ecuador and Guatemala...
Hegseth said absolutely.
Absolutely. Which leads us to the geopolitical framework making this all possible, right? The Americas Counter Cartel Coalition, or the A3C.
Right, the A3C. The text introduces the A3C as this massive 17-nation military alliance, which was formalized at the Shield of the Americas Summit back in March of 2026.
Right.
This is really the structural foundation for the entire strategy we've been discussing.
But a 17-nation alliance explicitly agreeing to lethal military force inside their own borders. How does a coalition that large actually coordinate something as sensitive as a kinetic strike?
It's complicated.
Yeah, you can't just have 17 different militaries calling in airstrikes independently.
No, the mechanics of an alliance like this imply a massive centralization of intelligence.
Yeah.
While the article doesn't detail the exact technical fusion centers, A coalition like the A3C typically functions by combining the advanced signals, intelligence, and aerial reconnaissance of the United States.
Like our drones and satellites.
Exactly. Combining that with the localized human intelligence and territorial access of the partner nation.
Oh, I see. So the partner nation provides the where and the who on the ground.
And the U.S. provides the how from the sky.
Wow. And it's all bound together by President Trump's stated commitment at that summit, which the article actually quotes directly.
What was the quote?
He said they are committing to, quote, using lethal military force to destroy the sinister cartels and terrorist networks once and for all.
Right. And Hegseth is actually calling this overarching strategy the Donroe Doctrine.
The Donroe Doctrine. Okay, so we're taking the old Monroe Doctrine.
From way back.
Right, which was all about keeping foreign European powers out of the Western Hemisphere. And we are basically weaponizing it to actively hunt non-state actors currently inside our hemisphere.
Yeah, the historical contrast is really the vital piece of this puzzle here.
Tell me more about that.
Well, the Monroe Doctrine was originally a defensive posture, right, regarding state sovereignty.
Yeah.
Keep out.
Right.
The Donroe Doctrine, as outlined in this text, is an offensive cross-border intervention strategy.
It totally flips the script.
It does. It transforms the whole concept of hemispheric defense from a shield against outsiders into a collaborative, highly militarized policing of the Americas.
Led by the U.S. military.
Exactly.
Taking back control of our hemisphere is the exact quote Hegseth used. But, look, neutralizing a global network requires a lot more than just dropping bombs on the physical nodes, right?
Sure.
You have to choke off the blood supply. So we've established the kinetic military side of this new doctrine. But that brings us to the financial warfare aspect.
Which is huge.
Yeah, and the article suggests this could have massive domestic ripple effects.
Right, because financial dismantling is really the quiet engine of any modern counterterrorism campaign. The text points to a proclamation signed by President Trump establishing that the U.S. will aggressively work to deprive these organizations of their access to financing and resources.
Okay, and I need to pause here to reiterate our neutrality rule, because here is where the author of the Red State article makes a fascinating but highly partisan connection.
Right, they pivot pretty hard here.
They highlight a post from an ex-user named JW de Nashville, and looking at the social media post that the author deliberately elevates, they seem to be operating on a sort of node theory.
Yeah, the node theory.
The post argues that dismantling these international terrorist networks will actually cause leftist domestic political groups, specifically Antifa, to wither on the vine.
That's the phrase they use.
Right, so it's like using systemic chemotherapy to treat a localized infection. The publication is arguing that because the military and financial tactics worked on the foreign tumor, the cartel, we should pump those exact same authorities through the domestic bloodstream to starve out these protest groups.
Right.
Is that the tactical leap they are making?
That is exactly the theoretical mechanism being advocated for in that post.
Wow.
The underlying assumption there is that domestic terror or protest groups don't exist independently.
Okay.
They believe these groups are financially and logistically tethered to these larger international foreign terrorist organizations.
So they're claiming a direct link.
Yeah, the author is suggesting that there is a literal pipeline of capital and resources flowing straight from cartels in South America to domestic actors inside the United States.
So the goal isn't just to stop drugs coming over the border, it's to bankrupt political adversaries at home by severing their alleged international funding. The ex-post explicitly calls for Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and State Secretary Marco Rubio to freeze the assets of anyone funding these domestic groups.
Right.
But how does that financial freezing actually work on a mechanical level?
Typically, this involves utilizing the Office of Foreign Assets Control.
OFAC.
Right, OFAC. When the State Department and Treasury officially designate an entity, they can cut them off from the SWIFT banking system.
Wow, so just totally locked out of global finance.
Completely locked out.
Yeah.
They can seize assets held in any U.S. institutions, and they can even apply secondary sanctions to any international bank that dares to do business with them.
It's a stranglehold.
It really is. And the tweet advocates using this immense global financial power to execute a worldwide shock and awe campaign.
Shock and awe.
Yeah. The stated objective is to make those international connections vanish literally overnight.
Leaving the domestic pieces of the network, as the post says, broke and in handcuffs. But wait, the post goes even further than just freezing bank accounts, right? It actually advocates for SOCOM's Special Operations Command raids against these domestic groups.
Yes, it does.
We're talking about taking the military apparatus we just discussed, deploying in Venezuela the kinetic strikes, the special forces, and pointing it at American citizens on American soil.
Which highlights a really profound blurring of the lines between foreign military action and domestic law enforcement.
Yeah, that's a huge line to cross.
Massive. The U.S. operates under very strict historical frameworks, like the Posse Comitatus Act.
Right.
And that act was designed explicitly to prevent the federal military from enforcing domestic policy or acting as a domestic police force.
But this article is pushing against that.
Yeah, the viewpoint elevated by this Red State article suggests a real eagerness, at least among certain commentators, to circumvent or just dissolve those boundaries entirely by applying the terrorist label across the board.
It's the ultimate expansion of scope.
It really is.
I mean, once you authorize the military to handle crime abroad by simply relabeling it as terrorism...
the toolkit changes completely.
Exactly. And the temptation to use those same overwhelming tools domestically becomes part of the public discourse. And I think that just shows how foreign policy successes are immediately leveraged for domestic ideological victories.
It perfectly demonstrates the malleability of these policy frameworks.
Yeah.
The article essentially argues that if the government possesses the legal authority and the kinetic power to destroy the A side of a network down in South America,
Right.
then they have a duty to use those exact same immense powers to destroy the B side of the network inside the United States.
So think about what this means for you, the listener, and how you process the daily news cycle moving forward. The next time you see a headline about border security, cartel violence, or honestly even domestic protests, you have to look at it through this new lens.
Sure.
The underlying rules of engagement have fundamentally changed. We are no longer living in a world where the primary tool for dealing with transnational crime is a subpoena or an extradition treaty.
No, we have totally transitioned from the courtroom to the battlefield.
Wow.
The U.S. government, through the A3C Alliance and this new Donroe Doctrine, has officially established that Latin American cartels will now face the exact same kinetic strike capabilities previously reserved for targets in the Middle East.
The ISIS treatment.
The ISIS treatment.
Yeah.
And as the text illustrates so clearly, the logistical and financial warfare that accompanies those strikes is being actively viewed by conservative commentators as a mechanism to achieve sweeping domestic impacts.
But as we look at the sheer scale of the Donroe Doctrine, I just keep coming back to the foundational pillar Hegseth built this entire strategy on.
The invitation.
The invitation. The United States is relying on 17 sovereign partner nations to explicitly invite the American military inside their borders to conduct lethal airstrikes.
Which leaves us with a really critical vulnerability in the doctrine to consider.
Which is?
What happens when the political winds within those 17 nations inevitably shift?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If a newly elected government in a partner nation decides they no longer want U.S. drones in their airspace, and they suddenly withdraw their invitation, what is the administration's protocol?
Right.
Does the United States respect their sovereignty and pack up its military apparatus? Or does the Donroe Doctrine mean that this new hemispheric war on terror has permanently set up camp in our own backyard, regardless of whether the host nation wants us there or not?
Man, that is the multi-billion-dollar question right there. Because if a quote-unquote dirtbag target is sitting in a country that revoked its invitation, does the military prioritize international law, or do they prioritize the strike?
It's going to be tested eventually.
We started today talking about how the U.S. was swapping out arrest warrants for rules of engagement. And I think what we've discovered is that once you militarize the justice system, the geopolitical consequences are impossible to put back in the box.
You really can't go backwards.
You can't. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We really appreciate you taking the time to explore the mechanics of this massive policy shift with us.
It has been a totally fascinating text to unpack with you. Keep looking for the how and the why behind the headlines, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
Deep dive in the building. UK, what really good? Let's dive in. Let's dive in. Get triggered, Netflix. You son of a niche. In your show Adolescence, you pulled a race switch. The real killer teen is black. You made him white. This ish just ain't right. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. us free. The right to bear arms, to speak and to agree. We honor our forefathers who fought with steadfast might for the dream of a nation shining bright in the night. In every town and village, in every heart and home, we'll uphold our principles. Together we'll roam. Through trials and through triumphs, we'll never lose our way. With conservative values leading us day by day, we're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground. For freedom, for tradition in this land we found. So here's to the brave, to the strong, to the free, to the spirit that binds us from sea to shining sea. We'll dive deep into our values, hold them close and true. For conservative hearts, there's no limit to what we can do. We're diving deep into the heart